Shabbat shalom, everyone. So, before I went to rabbinical school, the 2 years right before, I became a PhD dropout. Now, I don't usually get on the bima to brag about being a quitter, but this particular experience of quitting was quite important to my personal development. I had spent 2 years at the University of Chicago Divinity School studying Jewish philosophy, and I briefly imagined myself as some sort of Jewish intellectual academic. Now, instead, I discovered, quite honestly, that I would rather be at Shabbat Mishpacha than in the ivory tower writing papers. So here I am. Now, graduate school taught me many things. It taught me how to read closely, to think critically, to write extremely long papers. But most importantly, it brought me to a teacher, Professor Paul Mendes-Flohr, one of the great Jewish thinkers of his generation. Paul died last year, and though his scholarship will be studied by students for decades, he was the foremost scholar of Martin Buber. For those of us who knew him well, we will best remember his extraordinary kindness. We called him PMF. And beyond his brilliant teaching, he was truly a mensch. He hosted us for dinner so we could have extended conversations. He would leave me a Diet Coke at my favorite seat in the classroom because he knew I had an addiction. And when I told him I was going to quit the program, instead of giving me a hard time, he enthusiastically supported my decision to become a rabbi and told me that he believed that the synagogue was a vital home for Jewish intellectual life and that I could do a lot of good. PMF was also a character. Like many professors who have been teaching for decades, his classes always came with this set of favorite stories. You knew if you said something that reminded him of a topic, you were going to get one of these stories. And I can't think of this week's parasha, Yitro, without thinking of him. Whenever our conversations turn to these very common Jewish topics, chosenness, the challenge of being Jewish in a hostile world, covenant, or even sometimes just talking about God, PMF would share this very famous midrash. Now here's the background. In our portion, Moses goes up to the top of Mount Sinai to receive the 10 Commandments. But he's not the only character in this story. All of the people are there too. They are standing at the foot of the mountain. In Hebrew, it says they are tachtich bahar. They are, in English, we say at the foot of the mountain. That's our idiom. But the precise language in Hebrew means that they were standing underneath the mountain. So the rabbis go wild. In the Talmud, Rav Avdimi bar Hama bar Hassa imagines that at the moment of revelation, God lifted the mountain and held it out over the people, declaring, if you accept the Torah, all will be well. If not, this will be your grave. Okay, I can't do it as well as PMF did, but you need to imagine that I'm a 75-year-old man wearing a really cool scarf, and I have flowing white hair, and a really booming voice, and I'm saying, this will be your grave. He loved doing that. So in this midrash, which he brought up all the time, revelation is not a gift, but an ultimatum. We stand in covenant not because we choose it, but because we cannot be other than what we are. Now, this message of being forced to Torah is unsettling for modern liberal Judaism, which speaks in the language of choice. Reform Judaism, in fact, is founded in the principle of choice through knowledge. And yet, the other side of this is that as we sit here living in the shadow of the Holocaust, we are reminded that even when we feel that elements of our Judaism, our practice of Judaism, might be optional or chosen, the world often sees us as Jews first. This moment of revelation, receiving Torah and becoming a people grounded in shared values and history, is more than our origin story. The way that we tell this story reveals how we understand ourselves. It reveals our beliefs, our fears, our anxieties, our hopes, our dreams, our sense of community. Our vision of Sinai becomes a blueprint for our Jewish identity. So what is at stake if we imagine that this mountain is over our heads and that Sinai is coercion? Does that make Jewish identity feel like a punishment? Is this a life sentence? Or, more positively, can we see our Judaism as so essential that without it, we would cease to exist, we would cease to be who we are? Now, this midrash about Sinai is very well known because it's so dramatic. It's like a mountain. But the rabbis, in their pluralism and creativity, offered us many images of Sinai. In fact, in the same brand of midrash that looked at what it meant to be underneath the mountain, we have a completely different message. In the Mechilta de Rabbi Yishmael, the Israelites standing there at Sinai were afraid. There was thunder, there was lightning. They didn't know what was happening. And God lifts the mountain, but this time not as threat, as protection. The rabbis who read the love poetry of Song of Songs as this extended allegory of God's love for the Jewish people, quote, "O my dove, in the cranny of the rocks, hidden by the cliff, let me see your face, let me hear your voice." Here, God is not intimidating. God is tender. God is a parent protecting us. God meets our fear with empathy, and that mountain is not our death. That mountain is what saves us. In this midrash, once within the covenant, God's presence is available to us anytime we are afraid. And if we, created B'Tselem Elohim in the image of the divine, we then can be called to be a comforting presence for one another. The covenant is not coerced. The covenant is the place of safety. You see how a story can change how we feel about the same essential moment. And there are so many other midrashic stories for us to explore. In different midrashim, God is described as a groom meeting his bride, or as a king enslaving his subjects. And in the 5th century midrash, Besikta de Rav Kahana, they refuse to actually choose one God and instead give us this teaching. Rav Chanina Bar Papa said, "The Holy One appeared to Israel with a stern face, with a kind face, with a friendly face, with a joyous face. Therefore the Holy One said to them, 'Though you see me in all these guises, I am still one.' Rabbi Levi said, 'The Holy One appeared to them as though God were a statue with faces on every side, so that though 1,000 men might be looking at the statue, they would be led to believe that it was looking at each one of them uniquely.'" Now, it's not only the Torah that provides us with never-ending conversations. God is also inherently complex and multifaceted, capable of meeting each of us where we are. In this idea of revelation, where each of us saw a different God depending on who we are, revelation is not a flattening experience of communal conformity, but a relationship that holds us all as individuals and as a pluralistic collective. Maybe that is the one that speaks to you. I'm going to give you one more. This is another very famous one, and it comes from the Midrash on Deuteronomy called Sifrei. Before giving the Torah to Israel, the Midrash imagines that God sort of walked it around the whole world, offering it to all the different nations. But when the nations wisely asked what was inside the book, and they heard such commandments such as do not kill, do not commit adultery, do not steal, they thought that those commandments were too much, too far, didn't reflect who they were, and they refused the Torah. Only Israel, who, mind you, didn't even bother to read it, accepted the moral responsibility of the Torah right away. So, when God reveals the Torah and gives it to Israel, thunder shakes the whole world, and the nations are afraid. They think the world is being destroyed. But God instead says that the thunder is the sound of God giving strength to Israel. And hearing this, the nations respond, "If that is so, may God bless God's people with peace." Here is a completely different image. Jewish identity is rooted in our sense of responsibility. The Midrash suggests that the Torah was not given to Israel because Jews are inherently better. We are not chosen because we are more moral or more discerning or more wise than the other nations. We were given the Torah because we were willing to say yes. Jewish identity is not a privilege, it's a commitment. This also teaches us that Jewish distinctiveness comes from choosing to be shaped by the Torah. And even when its expectations require transformation and restraint, this is our task together. When the nations wish Israel peace, we learn that the purpose of the covenant is not separation for its own sake, but the hope that living by Torah will ultimately bring strength and peace to the world. Perhaps this is why our tradition preserves not one story of Torah, as we read in Exodus, but instead all of these creative imaginings. Some days we experience Judaism as something we would choose again and again, and other days it feels like something that chose us, claimed us, even obligated us beyond what is comfortable. Sometimes covenant feels overwhelming, like a mountain suspended over our heads, and sometimes it feels like shelter, like love, like protection and care. Sometimes it feels like our sacred responsibility as we step forward to accept Jewish morality and Torah. Judaism asks something real of us every day. So, my dear professor, PMF, did not judge me when I dropped out of his program. There were a lot of people in the program. He was fine. He was excited for me because he believed that the synagogue is a place where Jewish ideas and Jewish identity come alive. And Judaism, though written about in many books by many smart people, is not meant to be a theory alone. Every generation stands again at Sinai, not only asking, what happened there, but who will we be because of it? May we be a people who hold one another with compassion when the world feels frightening, who accept the moral responsibilities of Torah with courage, and who help ensure that the strength given to our people becomes, as the psalmist says, a blessing of peace for the world. Let us say together, Amen. Shabbat Shalom.